there is a quality of free speech that is prevented as collusion slash S originally instilled, relative to where and to how our America's founders and modern countries' founders did not have free speech and they had to pretend other. Because of the torture, extortion, slavery method, three ways manifest that was entrenched. Three ways manifest because nature had it that way. It was and is a design to exploit how nature works. Now as systems tactical terrier from being capable to be its system also positive onto itself as anything other than criminal insidiousness natures of positives in collusion slash S with the cause slash S of it. So Mr. Waters is a good man. People A through Z are good people, including people that, especially at cities, that are convicted of crimes. Before they were convicted of crimes, it's recorded that and how, worse than interstates and internationally alone. There were roles planting and changing, what's actually recorded on off all locations slash S, and collusions with that were used originally and still at all locations slash S also. And this breaching method propagated roles and maintained roles, blaming other things, others ourselves, for things America's founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. This would have been brought up in the nature debate, but the nature debate contains quality aspects in nature of instead used to measure and maintain what can't defend itself, self-value, as fact-treating nature. We can't just defend itself relative to the fact-treating nature-oriented breaching method. That is the scientific value. As being the human fact-treating nature breaching method is one of the things that nature shows us is true always. What caused slavery was. And that is also what our founders communicated. That's part of what our founders communicated that is true always. Where and how those communications are replaced and how that is gotten away with and pretend to not realize it's gotten away with simultaneously too is relative to not just the scientific value of the breaching method that we could use to discern other replacing things our founders told us to blame on the breaching method, like their own fact-treating nature extortion, the torture method against every single person, and the slavery method, fact-treating nature and therefore physical against every single person, sickly distinctly too, which made functional people would speak for a reason, practical reason, pure reason. Use Immanuel Kant's phrasing pure reason, but as the dictionary definition of those two words. In other words, in each word comes with multiple definitions because everything is hyper-additional nature. You guys see the YouTube channel of Mike Tyson. In other words, please tell Mike Tyson. I believe it was, I don't know how to spell, I believe it's Cessna. I don't know if that's where they got the name for the Cessna of the plane, but they used to fight with 5-pound Cessnas on their hands with ancient Roman boxing, or per the descriptions of ancient Roman boxing. See, this breaching method set up everything to be rediscovered and self-value the defenses of that as collusion slash S. With a breaching method that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded, names A through Z of the human species, body, system, before it became unabridged, before it became tactically abridged, slash hyper abridged. It was being led by the identity of the hyper simultaneous itself. which shows us it was being led by the difference between hyper invisible and the parts of hyper invisible, but still discernible, and the invisible, but still discernible, and the parts of the invisible, but still discernible, and the parts of speech were revealed to teach this before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrought. So that no one has remembered the history of English correctly, because English, but nature itself will show this. Right now, actively, there are wire crime acts and methods that multiple agencies have, where there is remote possession of people who want and need to have debates about the integrity of someone just because they have a title as FBI, as Homeland Security, as Defense Department, as a prosecutor, as a judge, as an attorney general. This breaching method assigns roles with its own use /S of the difference between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and or the names tied to them, sources, their lawyers, same thing with the courts, same thing with the prisons, same thing with the corrections and judicial offices, and names and spots next to it. This exploits where and how we are value progression method system. So Americans know on a mass scale that we want and need and have means better than free, like that for the veterans' homes, for example. Not basing that because they fought for their country, basing that because they, in other words, except for the part where they fought for their country, but where they sacrificed and let other people do the thinking, because they had to play a role or be in trouble. See, that is employed. This breaching method that knew that it could use defenses of different /S, where it was never defined, except because they're replacing what our founders communicated to us. That's why and how. In other words, clearer than that. I didn't even mean it when I said bad things about every president before they were president, because I was testing. Because they told us because it's clearer than day. There are Republican themed and there are Democrat themed from Connecticut, used remotely as the same. A certain type of forgiveness is because they never had a chance, because relative to uses of roles, either self-valuing, other communicated for our founders, even regardless if they know it or not, because it's relative to and as styles, needs, and natures. And it means to pretend they don't realize, and it means to get away with it, pretend they don't realize the value of unabridged Constitution, and the value of how on a mass scale little kids could discern. There's a different part of the problem is because there's a quality of fact, cheaping nature of fakeness at all locations. That's these collusions with it, where there's never integrity. There's a quality of fact, cheaping nature forced to make and cover up details, and all exceptions, exception nature. How that was used to hide that, because then there was all natures of statutes and precedents, self-value, and descriptions. There are means to show that's fake and haven't been fake, per how they use remotely at countries A through Z. How relativity to answer to our questions, like how could they leave out black pupils' right to vote, and how that breaching method assigned other communicated for nature than it communicates, except for how it would, and as what is only natural as criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer, but it is recorded that lawyers are consciously, originally, and still they have been framing issues as collusions with uses of exceptions and of exception nature descriptions and motivations descriptions, and sanity or morality descriptions, tactical ulterior from what could defend itself and afford quality of fact should be nature unobstructed, and so self-valuing more and more. Roles of predicate acts with facts method, with a singular predicate acts with facts method /s that generated originally and still at all database tied locations, and then further where and how the sciences are manifest, and or exceptions like kids or their as or adults as their parents or whatever relative to kid. Those words, those values, kid, adult, they're not just the possessions of industry so sickly and insidiously while pretending other with politics alone, or with criminal enterprises, private and overt juxtaposed alone, and news alone. News recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirm they have been directed to implant evidences and the difference of their roles, their sources' roles, on and off, and next to all natures of crime scenes, including preemptively, while already having been, and actively. So there are directions and motivations to lie with different natures of industries. And so we have not had accounted for, not by accident, where and how our founders demonstrate their communications demonstrates that we're supposed to understand how the industries are forced many ways more so by the human fact treating nature breaching method than by our founders, let alone by nature, which is hypernative pure, and shows us the increasing value of indigenous populations anywhere they are to the species volume science. That doesn't mean we should jump in on litigation. Because like, we're doing it right with our logic when there's differences. In other words, we're not leaving out the breaching method. That is not names A through Z. In fact, A through Z, effectively it measured and maintained, blaming other things, others or selves, for things they were supposed to blame on itself. See, we're not supposed to put words in the mouth of Mao Zedong, but we are supposed to try to understand where, how, and why names A through Z of the human species body, of individual bodies, have left out that quality of nature sophistication necessary, for example, to properly speak for yin yang or alpha and omega, which are more probably and demonstrably having been revealed to be taught together, and about the constant and the variable, and about the algorithm, the algorithm / hyper algorithm. That is the identity of the hyper simultaneous. How are you? How are your vaccines? So there is an identity of hyper relativity. George Viking. So God bless the Vikings too. So everyone had to defend little parts, little counters to where and how A through Z. Their names were taken over, and they became defenses of also the names of the sciences abridged in defenses of themselves without realizing. And then what did that? Got names A through Z to blame other things, others, or itself on what it caused. The proverbial devil, the proverbial shaitan. And then it made them self-defend that. And then it knew that nature would demonstrate that too, while nature was continually demonstrating to humanity. There's a human fact-achieving nature breaching method now involved with syntax and convictions with syntax, with words, and or with nature, like regarding the nature of debate, regarding the relativity of how we have black pupils, white eyes, same color eyes, and different color eyes at the same time, where nature is projecting this theater unabridged All exceptions, exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other demonstration, the same thing. Slash S, like even if someone puts contacts in, so they have the same exact color as someone else too, with the parts that's exception nature. In other words, for example, that's what if we pay attention to those exceptions, it shows that's one of the things that it uses in ways that nobody else could. Exceptions in exception nature and a special difference. There are ways that people could do it and mimic nature's identity itself, as we know have stayed with suits and ties, counters, and exceptions used remotely. Individuals of the species body on a mass scale, we all could discern this. But the second people start speaking with groups, all groups already have entertained collusions with hearsay, racketeering, and worse than war crimes, and counters to it as collusions and the difference uses also. This made a certain type of pseudo-tactical, pseudo-sophistication / hyper-pseudo-sophistication only remembered. For example, so to speak, about that which replaced that which our founders and ancient sciences had revealed languages and demonstration of, the sciences and demonstration of. Their nature comes as a means to demonstrate how nature itself showed the ancients needs and means to discern. There's a distinct nature of criminal insidiousness that a positive could be. Like a truth could be used for a lie or to screen a lie. Like the value of, people say, oh, it's politics. So that's increasingly used where and how this breaching method at countries A through Z. They stayed roles with a breaching method that came from before modern countries were even founded. There was a interview between Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin somewhere on YouTube, if you search for that. For example, in that, Vladimir Putin was cut off trying to speak about Russian history. The same way everyone cuts anyone off if they try to speak about American history properly. And this is gotten away with per blind faith in the value of the experts. There are a certain type of victim / hyper victim as the names of each industry. Title or the difference of that too is used for this method that uses all different / S tactical ulterior from the identity of hyper difference that science shows is existent. There is an identity of hyper relativity, not as part of itself that is juxtaposed, and part of itself that is semi-juxtaposed, and part of itself that won't juxtapose with temporary. And this is also the same body that is grouped 3 ways, distinctly from 5 ways, as the identity of time. So there's the extent of time that we know of the past that we know was true always, each person. There's an extent of that which is now active and grouped to know that we know is true always. And there's an extent like the seasons of the future that we know about the value of now, even though its complete identity is not manifest here yet. And those 3, we can know an extent of truth that is true always, not denying the slight exceptions, and not being used by ourselves, others, present or not, realized, involved or not. Because if we sense if we're really trying to use it with its system, which is hypernative pure this way, no. I don't just say that because of president / chief, for example. The difference between them, how and why they're incompatible, has more so to do with how the breaching method assign roles with all natures of differences and defenses of uses of that syntactically or not. That's silence too. And the difference of that too is used remotely with convictions and conviction nature. For example, where and how people we have the concentrated value of all these school shootings. There are theories on it, but they're leaving out recorded the difference between police forms and the nature of debate regarding it was and is used for predicate acts methods, with a difference between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and interbranch. Names at campuses, names on all sides of cases in the courts at the same time, and news at the same time. Names next to tied body dumping spots, child abuse reports, locations, leaders of kids. Same names one's tied to them, time uses of elderly homes, sense and sensibilities of people there, people associated with the programs, all natures of industries, employments. Part of the reason we have not addressed the way our founders communicate to us to address how the breaching method played roles some ways more with that than any other thing. Again, our founders did not have a quality of fact-keeping nature necessary to defend free speech. And so instead they forced everyone to say, get the Constitution unabridged, and noted that we have rights that are too numerous to list. See, right now they should be keeping. Thank God they didn't kill usually they kill the person. I mean, it's better to do that than having them kill people. But when there's shootings, in other words, but when the people who will question them, like the people who will question the guy who was caught with the gun was apparently going to shoot the president. Again, a different guy now, in other words. But there is a difference between the police forms involved with predicate acts with facts methods. Crimes. As people speak about crimes, and they get away with this per their readings of statutes that give the benefit of the doubt at the last second to the interbranch. And a breaching method showed them how to read statutes like that, leaving out exceptions in exception nature as they are actually recorded, forcing that non-discern also as collusion /S with manifest and maintained self-value. They don't even understand the extent of it. The forced patients and criminals of prisons and the names there, and the names on off the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices of Connecticut, for example. They are also on off the state capitol, next to parks, planting predicate acts with facts methods, styles manifest, where and how they don't even realize that countries A through Z, where and how there are all kinds of identities of relativity, to the identity of relativity of the breaching method as a scientific value that can also be used to discern other things, others, or selves, blamed for where and how. It's a scientific value we know true always. It's one of the things that slavery was about. In other words, and with our questions that nature itself shows us, but we have nature's words replaced. Pace. So there are a whole bunch of people at Trinity College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are neighbors of mine named Cololo and a whole bunch of people tied to them who have wire crimes with Wethersfield police and lawyers and of FBI and FBI Director Robert Lusk and his co-defendants at 2000, before 2004 and before, after it, with people also before the World Trade Center attack. They're involved with FBI and courts, families, including judges, prosecutors, and families and foreign and domestic military, with locations next to campuses, and roles planting evidences with all sides of criminal and civil cases and news at the same time. Where and how we have natural questions that are replaced too, like where and how that quality of fact-checking nature of the law has stayed collusion so long, with where and how we need simply to have black pupils' rights advised, not to be, we don't even have to be lawyers, another lawyer, to discern how lawyers on all sides of criminal and civil cases were used remotely and are used remotely and with the courts at the same time and the news at the same time, names out of the crime scenes for reasons realized, but how they also came with this hyper invisible but still discernible reason that is more than just discernible by appreciating properly the scientific value of the fact that one of the things, again, slavery was about is a predicate acts of the facts delivery system method. Two, this is debatable, but who would debate it is going to have quality aspects in nature and demonstration of the same thing, and they're going to have recorded reliance upon already having been used. They fabricate and change what is actually digitally recorded. They have a whole bunch of people defending uses of words like extremism. And you know, in other words, they're calling people crazies as a certain type of victim / hyper victim. That is, as the states, A through Z, recorded criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, factual nature, quality aspects in nature, which is what we're dealing with this critical subject that we all wanted to have hyper care brought to years ago, so to speak. In other words, always Creek, see president / chief. In other words, there are natures on debates and what's racism and feelings as collusions of behavior racketeering that is recorded, but is rules with it. They're replacing what's recorded. See, there are countries like that were connected together before our founders were born by nature, but then further as systems simultaneously tactical ulterior from natures. So nature would demonstrate that, and it was waiting for those demonstrations to employ roles, needs, and natures, longing and needing to keep those demonstrations instead. Uses of those demonstrations as means to keep blame on other things, others ourselves. The real worst causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and that breaching method cause things. Because nature itself has been showing us to speak about and understand the value of a human fact-achieving nature breaching method and forced self-value roles, or otherwise that body is sensed individually grouped, no matter how, if it's a majority of people, no matter if it's everyone, including any grouping of nations that comes from this. This breaching method was hyper sophistication and made the only natures of hyper sophistication at countries A through Z as only positive as criminal and seditious natures of positive. Collusions with all kinds of predicate acts with facts methods, all kinds of criminal insidiousness delivery system methods, roles, needs, and natures and names, not even present at New York City, for example. The suburb, every suburb, let alone the cities, let alone New York City, where we have a World Trade Center manifest, relativity to where and to how, all have stayed uses of their names and the names of others through an as systems tactical ulterior, roles of predicate acts with facts methods. In other words, is manifest at all locations, areas, and states. people not self-valued role at each age of fact should be nature. Each age of fact should be nature, what we are actually capable of discerning and what is actually being shown to us by nature. You guys have this replaced. You have the motives for it replaced. And screening recorded timed collusions with a whole bunch of other countries and with the difference racketeering, worse than war crimes method, so to speak, involved here with the predicate acts of facts method in black pupils. So we must attend. So we can make this, we could do this too. We'll make a YouTube video about it as a species body, placing down a hyper, donating our time and our videos to a hyper temporary industry to make temporary / lasting adjustments and means fathomable for people to access nature's means to cause positive value nature progressions acts means out of nowhere everywhere at once, or else to sense and make that fun and wanted to sense. You know, we mess up. So you mess up in this game. In other words, all natures of success, definitions of success. It is not by accident. There are styles and natures of definitions and of definers that can't defend themselves that way and afford discern where and how we have not made success relative to where and to how. We have not liberated the voice of James Madison, of the founders behind him. And we have not liberated George Washington and forced roles with words and natures of industries and natures of people and things that would not have been entertained, especially syntactically, many ways, had not a breaching method already been entrenched distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, and then had not the maintainers of that been themselves already subjects to and as this, themselves also having screened, they also hyper additional breaching method and rolls with it. Further, there are other things besides the breaching method that is also demonstrated to us by nature and evolved. And why, for example, we should call it a hyperarchetypal criminal enterprise syntactically, a predicate acts of facts delivery system method / criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method / the difference of that with the nature of debate. For example, delivery system rolls with itself, delivery system method, singular. It delivered a whole bunch of methods of liars and truth tellers as collusions, whether they realized it or not. The whole arrays of takes on what witch trials were about, for example, even if they were completely made up or not. Witch trials were about that breaching method, which has originally and still replaced what our founders were allowed to speak, to communicate rather. But thank God, communications is simultaneously greater than, more finite than, and with active grouped relativity than this word is spoken has in some ways. So in other words, we could discern this. All you have to do is, in other words, the nature of debate contains quality aspects, natures, and styles that are rules with self-value, wire crime maxim methods, and then styles, needs, and natures changing what people say. Oh, that's gobbledygook. Word salad. Simultaneously, there needs for them to say that. The difference between that two was his recorded use. All sides in criminal and civil cases. It's not just in the courts at the same time, the news at the same time, people next to the tight body number spots, child abusers, forced locations. It's not just that. It's the difference of it there, here, because of how live progressions and natures themselves are being used by the breaching method that is also using the database's identity of relativity / relativities to ourselves and to our names. Now through an system still abridged, still incapable of pretending to be able to speak for or that anyone spoke for the Constitution unabridged, as styles, needs, and natures of logic, of syntax that can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to project. Short words with syntax proper, and convictions using what is true always. Again, like how will cause slavery. One thing that is true always that caused slavery and witch trials is a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, regardless if witch trials were made up or not. It was about that same exact, or who made them up, why they had to, regardless. It's about that same breaching method. Black pupils. We need more than just unity. We need to use nature's system to answer our questions here, and it will. It even show us, so we have to do things out of sequence because non-distinctly, but also distinctly, countries A through Z are victims. Where how use of names A through Z, the good things and the bad impositions, everything is just to maintain a quality of fact should be nature as criminal insidiousness. So a bunch of people at Trinity College have a person named Joshua Stryker, and there's a Joshua Julian who Mark Violet and a Justa Govinskis and others that know my name. I don't know their name. They're like Black KKK themed, Latino themed intelligence next to Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College, involved with the Violet family with Yukon names, like involved with O'Brien family members and Colella family members, with all sides in criminal and civil cases, and with extended family members per them, that in other words, and per police, have federal evidence as crimes of people named Scalora and their roles with news and people intelligence next to news locations involved with Scalora interstates with the World Trade Center attack and names next to it, and increasingly involved with them with Wethersfield police forging and switching names and falsified police reports, also as their roles with their cousins with home break-ins. And I'm not saying they're related, but if they had a kid, a Joe DeMauro and a Heather Hansen, a lot of people would agree. If I showed them the picture of an Aaron Mate associated with the YouTube channel of Judge Napolitano, and there's a girl, her last name is Anna Parampil, would look just like a daughter of a Heather Hansen. They're one of the ones involved with people named Colella and O'Brien. I never seen them around O'Brien. I barely ever saw them around Ray Colella, who's one of my neighbors, except for when we were in a high school, a middle school. I never saw him in the middle school. I saw one time real quick a Joe DeMauro on the middle school campus. I never saw on the middle school campus a Heather Hansen. And she had other boyfriends at the same time, per them, as the ones who have been planting evidences also on Facebook with New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and people with Connecticut's District Court who are involved with predicate acts intercities between campuses with leaders of kids. They have roles with conversations with leaders of kids and kids with that have been planting evidences with names from off campuses. And the difference between that is a whole bunch of countries involved with those names, overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They're also illegitimately, in other words, forgiveness is so we can get on paper, and then we can get through it, because there was remote uses of the foreign names also at their own locations too. And we have formal reason, logic, nature experts that are originally still all people want this demonstrated. We have crackpots in backgrounds putting fake transcripts, attaching little kids to fake and changed conversations and communications, totally fake, made up too, into databases with foreign and domestic, on and off campuses connected, and roles of that are confessed, as this breaching method uses remotely the natures of the difference between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the interbranch intelligence. They've never been legitimately undercover. They never legitimately, there has not been one properly used campus since some ancient times. Prepare our minds, vaccines. Judge Napolitano's Facebook page is involved with their recorded uses of the Facebook page of the Britain Superior Court, and then a whole bunch of other ones when I mentioned it on Facebook. They made a whole bunch of other ones real fast as passion crimes, because they're trying to hide motives, because before the World Trade Center attack at West Hartford locations and New Britain locations, Harper Courts, New Britain Superior Court, and Connecticut's District Court had collusions with a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military, including a Kuwaiti general and their family. And you can't make that up. In other words, relative with the deans involved and uses of deans' kids and further child offenders, leaders of the kids, as names increasingly tied to retired Wethersfield police chiefs. These are also people tied to the investigations of and uses of I don't know her name, but she was dragged to her death, and her roles with a conversation with one that and roles with names at the locations next to Harvard Hospital that are increasingly involved with people involved with state police, families, interstates, and F.B.I. And these are also people at Central Connecticut State University and other locations with, Secret Service and their roles with a whole bunch of different guns and shooting ranges with the names involved with predicate acts with facts. And then sequence shifting when we bring up their names. In other words, it's relative to where and to how they're the also uses of how they know people. Oh, we have knowledge of this person. Oh, when there was instances, they're on a mass scale fabricating police reports to hide how they use. There are roles with use/s of locations as a whole bunch of roles, sensing who's gonna discern properly what nature demonstrates to us. For example, with the revelations that come from appreciating how sickly distinctly against our will, if we are not Native American. We know that we didn't want that breaching method against the Native Americans. We didn't want it against the colonists either. We didn't want it against, let alone the states. So they made exceptions and they showed them to us. But they, like with the Westerns, they the natives want to kill you. In other words, we are all hyper native, and Native Americans are our founders. They left that out with the Westerns. They made either A or B. See president/chief, and that's 3 volumes, because there are 3 parts of hyper invisible but still discernible. For example, those 3 parts of time. Again, the extent of the past that was true, that we know our ways, what is active now, and what is to come. See, this is true always for its use of communications with us. See, it is not the season itself that we know is to come, but we know the value of it. We know the values of the seasons that are not here before they come. See, we have the hyper native nature's communications, prevented short words with convictions proper. Otherwise, they are sensed. And that is adapted to, even if it is a majority of people, even if it is everyone, even if it is any grouping of countries that comes from this. Not one had syntactical possession of their locations, areas, and states proper. And we could turn this, we could make hyperpositives out of nowhere at A through Z. All I have to do is admit that. And hyper additional means we could set Palestine and Ukraine. They will help countries A through Z. And Russia would agree. We just have to put the right plan. And every country A through Z would agree. We just have to stack the means till it's right. And we have to make it fathomable instantly. We could do this with a temporary plan / company. And and there are means that we could show that we have to communicate, and we could discern uses remotely that even themselves they don't realize of all that tied to actual directions to hide things, like roles with how even peaceful nuclear generation causes an identity of the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that increasingly only positive as negative value nature. In other words, there are exceptions, and exception nature, but this contemplation as the contemplation of those most critical things, black pupils, to come to and be able to appreciate the proper answers. We have to be able to, as a quality of fact, cheaping nature, for example, to be able to appreciate where and how, if anyone would even try to debate, that what caused slavery was a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, a fact cheaping nature oriented one. Their quality aspects and their fact cheaping nature will have demonstrations of the same thing. /S, for example, being criminal insidiousness. Criminal insidiousness natures of solutions of convictions only capable of being per a certain type of victim / hyper victim. Our founders' words replaced. They are the same natures of communications replaced by the other founders. Nature itself shows this. So I'm not putting words in another leader's mouth. A through Z, we have been used as systems tactical ulterior, from the one that is the only one that can't be invented, and also still positive onto itself, and not positive as a criminal insidious nature positive, per its definition of it, which nature demonstrates. See, someone even entertains those laws that were entertained, that are entertained now, but let alone in colonization in early states. It's going to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. In this breaching method knew that then they could show them they had roles with that. And how they could get away with that by blaming other things, others themselves, for those demonstrations, for things, even when correctly, because increasingly that made that only that made that real and kept and keeps that real. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Vaccines. All the topics in the news. So there's a Joshua Stryker who's involved with Wethersfield Police Facebook page and the Britain Superior Court's Facebook page. There's a Joshua Schumack who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed his mother's involved with them. And that's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed on Facebook. She has roles with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic, medical, and interreligious people with some KKK, black-themed intelligence. They have roles on all sides of criminal and civil cases already. These are people with medicine at UConn, foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions are out with psychiatry too. Reason, black pupils. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, fear. So increasingly, people on all sides of Hartford Hospital, like a house with the name Mayano, a business with the name Ayala, a business with the name, I don't know if it's still there, a Demorals, but a Demorals Market in Rocky Hill too. They're also involved with federal evidence crimes, with police departments, and with the same house /S involved with it too. Multiple police departments, plural, and retired Wethersfield police chiefs, and multiple judges and their family members, and their roles with themselves planting evidence, identity theft, fraud, slanders. We're going to examine how, fake sciences are only allowed to speak and get away with pretending other, even though it's demonstrated. Certain type of victim /hyper victim, if they want to be treated that way, then get them out of our business. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. Then we can address the foreign names involved. There are criminal enterprises and people involved with violence and poisons, not just and fake motivations. Increasingly, people are planting all nature's investigators influence the people to do, say something. They're leaving out use of that remotely and what's actually communicated. That's why that's also confessions. Vaccine. That's just things.